Men of Iron, Chapter 8. Everyone knows the disagreeable, lurking discomfort that follows a quarrel, a discomfort that embitters the very taste for life, for the time being. Such was the dull distaste that Miles felt that morning, after what had passed in the dormitory. Everyone in the proximity of such an open quarrel feels a reflected constraint, and in Miles' mind was a disagreeable doubt whether that constraint meant disapproval of him or of his late enemies. It seems to him that Guskin added the last bitter twang to his unpleasant feelings when, half an hour later, they marched with the others to chapel. "Why do you breed such trouble for yourself, Miles?" said he, referring to what he had already said. "Is it not foolish for you to come hither to this place, and then not submit to the ways thereof, as the rest of us do?" "Ye talk not like a true friend to chide me thus," said Miles sullenly, and he withdrew his arm from his friend's. "Marry, come up," said Guskin. "If I were not your friend, I would let you jog your own way. It aches not my bones to have yours drubbed." Just then they entered the chapel, and words that might have led to a quarrel were brought to close. Miles was not slow to see that he had the ill will of the head of their company. That morning in the armory he had occasion to ask some question of Blunt. The head squire stared coldly at him for a moment, gave him a short, gruff answer, and then, turning his back abruptly, began talking with one of the other bachelors. Miles flushed hot at the other's insulting manner, and looked quickly around to see if any of the others had observed what had passed. It was a comfort to him to see that all were too busy arming themselves to think of anything else. Nevertheless, his face was lowered as he turned away. "Some day I will show him that I am as good a man as he muttered to himself. "An evil-hearted dog to put shame upon me." The storm was brewing and ready to break. That day was exceptionally hot and close, and permission had been asked by and granted to those squires not on duty to go down to the river for a bath after exercise at the Pells. But as Miles replaced his arms in the rack, a little page came with a bidding to come to Sir James in his office. "Look now," said Miles, "here is just my ill fortune. Why might not he have waited an hour longer rather than cause me to miss going with you?" "Nay," said Guskin, "let not that grieve you, Miles. Wilkes and I will wait for you in the dormitory. Will we not, Edmund? Make your haste and go to Sir James." Sir James was sitting at the table studying a scroll of parchment when Miles entered his office, and stood before him at the table. "Well, boy," said he, laying aside the parchment and looking up at the lad, "I have tried you fairly for these few days, and may say that I have found you worthy to be entered upon the rolls as a squires of the body." "I give you thanks, sir," said Miles. The knight nodded his head in acknowledgment, but did not give the word of dismissal that Miles had expected. "Do you mean to write a letter home soon?" said he suddenly. "Aye," said Miles, gaping in great wonderment at the strangeness of the question. "Then when ye do write," said Sir James, "give my deep regards to your father." Then he continued, after a brief pause, "Him did I know well in times gone by, and we were right true friends in hearty love, and for his sake I would befriend you, that is, in so much as is fitting." "Sir," said Miles. Sir James held up his hand, and he stopped short in his thanks. "But, boy," said he, "that which I sent forward to tell you was more important than these. Do you know that your father is an attainted outlaw?" "Nay," cried Miles, his cheeks blazing up as red as fire. "Who says that of him lies in his teeth?" "You mistake me," said Sir James quietly. "It is sometimes no shame to be outlawed and banned. Had it been so, I would not have told you thereof, nor have bidden you send my true love to your father, as I did but now. But, boy, he stands continually in great danger, greater than ye know. Were it known where he lives hidden, it might be to his undoing and utter ruin. I thought you might know that, and so I sent for you to tell you that it behooves you to say not one single word concerning him to any of these new friends of yours, nor who he is, nor what he is." "But how came my father to be so banned?" said Miles, in a constrained and husky voice, and after a long time of silence. "That I may not tell you just now," said the old knight, "only this. that I have been bidden to make it known to you that your father has an enemy full as powerful as my lord the Earl himself, and that through that enemy all his ill fortune, his blindness, and everything has come. Moreover, did this enemy know where your father lives, he would slay him right speedily." "Sir," cried Miles, violently smiting his open palm upon the table, "tell me who this man is, and I will kill him." Sir James smiled grimly. "You talk like a boy," said he. "Wait until you are grown to be a man. Perhaps then ye may repent you of these bold words, for one time this enemy of your father's was reckoned the foremost knight in England, and he is now the king's dear friend, and a great lord." "But," said Miles, after another long time of heavy silence, "will not my lord then befriend me for the sake of my father, who was one time his dear comrade?" Sir James shook his head. "It may not be," said he. "Neither ye nor your father must look for open favour from the Earl. If he befriended Falworth, and it came to be known that he had given him aid or succour, it might be to his own undoing. No, boy, ye must not even look to be taken into the household to serve with gentlemen as the other squires serve, but must even leave your own life here and fight your own way." Miles' eyes blazed. "Then," cried he fiercely, "it is a shame and a tain upon my lord the Earl, and cowardice as well, and never will I ask favour from him with so untrue a friend as to turn his back upon a comrade in trouble as he turns his back upon my father." "Ye are a foolish boy," said Sir James with a bitter smile, "and know naught of the world. If ye would look for a man to befriend man to his own danger, ye must look elsewhere than on this earth. Was I not one time Mackworth's dear friend, as well as your father? It would cost him naught to honour me, and here am I, fallen to be a teacher of boys. Go to, you are a fool." Then, after a little pause of brooding silence, he went on to say that the Earl was no better or worse than the rest of the world, that men of his position had many jealous enemies, ever seeking their ruin, and that such must look first of all each to himself, or else be certainly ruined, and drag down others in that ruin. Miles was silenced, but the bitterness had entered his heart, and abided with him for many a day afterward. Perhaps Sir James read his feeling in his frank face, for he sat looking curiously at him, twirling his grizzled moustache. "Ye are like to have a hard knocks of it, lad, before ye have gotten safely through the world," said he with more kindness in his harsh voice than was usual. "But get ye not into fights before your time." Then he charged the boy very seriously to live at peace with his fellow squires, and for his father's sake as well as his own, to enter into none of the broils that were so frequent in their quarters. It was with this special admonition against brawling that Miles was dismissed, to enter, before 5 minutes had passed, into the first really great fight of his life. Besides Goskin and Wilkes, he found gathered in the dormitory 6 or 8 of the company of squires who were to serve that day upon household duty. Among others, Walter Blunt and 3 other bachelors, who were charging their coarse service clothes, for others were fit for the household. "Why did ye tarry so long?" said Guskin, as Miles entered. "I thought ye were never coming." "Where go ye, Falworth?" cried Blunt from the other end of the room, where he was lacing his doublet. Just now Miles had no heart in the swimming, or sport of any sort, but he answered shortly, "I go to the river to swim." "Nay," said Blunt, "ye go not forth from the castle today. Have ye forgotten how ye did answer me back about fetching the water this morning? This day ye must do penance. So go ye straight to the armory, and scour up my breastplate." From the time he had arisen that morning, everything had gone wrong with Miles. He had felt himself already outraged in rendering service to the bachelors. He had quarrelled with the head of the squires, he had nearly quarrelled with Guskin, and then he had come the bitterness and worst of all, the knowledge that his father was an outlaw, and that the Earl would not stretch out a hand to aid him, or to give him any countenance. Blunt's words brought the last bitter cut to his heart, and they stung him to fury. For a while he could not answer, but stood glaring with a face fairly convulsed with passion at the young man, who continued his toil, unconscious of the wrath of the new recruit. Guskin and Wilkes, accepting Miles' punishment as a thing of course, were about to leave the dormitory when Miles checked them. "Stop!" Francis, he cried hoarsely. Think ye that I will stay behind to do yonder dog's dirty work? No, I go with you. A moment or two of dumb, silent amazement followed his bold words. Then Blunt cried, Are ye mad? Nay, answered Miles in the same hoarse voice, I am not mad. I tell you a better man than you should not stay me from going if I wish to go. I will break your cockle head for that speech, said Blunt furiously. He stooped as he spoke, and picked up a heavy clog that lay at his feet. It was no insignificant weapon either. The shoes of those days were sometimes made of cloth, and had a long pointed toes stuffed with tow or wool. In muddy weather, thick heavy clogs or wooden soles were strapped, like a skate, to the bottom of the foot. That clog which Blunt had seized was perhaps 18 or 20 inches long, 2 or 2.5 inches thick at the heel, and tapered to a point at the toe. As the older lad advanced, Guskin stopped between him and his victim. Do not harm him, Blunt, he pleaded. Bear ye in mind how new come he is among us. He knows not our ways as yet. Stand ye back, Guskin, said Blunt harshly as he thrust him aside. I will teach him our ways so that he will not soon forget them. Close to Miles' feet was another clog like the one which Blunt held. Miles snatched it up and set his back against the wall, with a white face and a hearty beating heavily and tremendously, but with courage steeled to meet the coming encounter. There was a hard, grim look in his blue eyes that for a moment perhaps quelled the other lad. He hesitated. Tom, Walt, Ned, come hither, and lend me a hand with this knave. If ye come nigh me, panted Miles, I will brain the first within reach. Then Guskin dodged behind the others, and without being seen, slipped out of the room for help. The battle that followed was quick, sharp, and short. As Blunt strode forward, Miles struck, and struck with might and main, but he was too excited to deliver his blow with calculation. Blunt parried it with the clog he held, and the next instant, dropping his weapon, gripped Miles tightly around the body, pinning his arms to his side. Miles also dropped the clog he held, and, wrenching out his right arm with a sudden heave, struck Blunt full in the face, and then with another blow sent him staggering back. It all passed in an instant. The next, the 3 other bachelors were upon him, grabbing him by the body, the arms, the legs. For a moment or two they swayed and stumbled hither and thither, and then down they fell in a struggling heap. Miles fought like a wildcat, kicking, struggling, scratching, striking with elbows and fists. He caught one of the 3 by his collar, and tore his jacket open from the neck to the waist. He drove his foot into the pit of the stomach of another, and knocked him breathless. The other lads, not in the fight, stood on the benches and the beds around, but such was the awe inspired by the prestige of the bachelors, that not one of them dared to lend a hand to help him, and so Miles fought his fierce battle alone. But 4 to 1 were odds too great, and though Miles struggled as fiercely as ever, by and by it was with less and less resistance. Blunt had picked up the clog he had dropped, and he first attacked the lad, and now stood over the struggling heap, white with rage, the blood running from his lip, cut and puffed where Miles had struck him, and murder looking out from his face, if ever it looked out of the face of any mortal being. Hold him a little, said he fiercely, and I shall still him for you. Even yet it was no easy matter for the others to do his bidding, but presently he got his chance and struck a heavy, cruel blow at Miles' head. Miles only partly warded it off with his arm. Hitherto he had fought in silence. Now he gave a harsh cry. Holy saints, cried Edmund Wilkes. They'll kill him. Blunt struck 2 more blows, both of them upon the body, and then at last they had the poor boy down, with his face upon the ground, and his arms pinned to his sides. And Blunt, bracing himself for the stroke, with a grin of rage raised a heavy clog for one terrible blow that should finish the fight. How now, messieurs, said a harsh voice that fell upon the turmoil like a thunderclap, and there stood Sir James Lee. Instantly the struggle ceased, and the combatants scrambled to their feet. The older lads stood silent before their chief, but Miles was deaf and blind and mad with passion. He knew not where he stood or what he said or did. White as death he stood for a while, glaring about him, catching his breath convulsively. Then he screamed hoarsely, Who struck me? Who struck me when I was down? I will have his blood that struck me. He caught sight of Blunt. It was he that struck me, he cried. Foul traitor, coward, and thereupon leapt at his enemy like a wildcat. Stopped, cried Sir James Lee, clutching him by the arm. Miles was too blinded by his fury to see who it was that held him,
"I will not stop," he cried, struggling and striking at the knight. "Let me go. I will have his life that struck me when I was down." The next moment he found himself pinned close against the wall, and then, as though his sight came back, he saw the grim face of the old one-eyed knight looking into his. "Do ye know who I am?" said a stern voice. Instantly Myles ceased struggling, and his arms fell to his side. "Aye," he said in a grasping voice, "I know you." He swallowed spasmically for a moment or two, and then, in a sudden revulsion of feeling, burst out sobbing convulsively. Sir James marched the two off to his office, he himself walking between them, holding an arm of each. The other lads followed behind, awestruck and silent. Entering the office, Sir James shut the door behind him, leaving the group of squires clustered outside about the stone steps, speculating in whispers as to what would be the outcome of the matter. After Sir James had seated himself, the two standing facing him, he regarded them for a while in silence. "How now, Walter Blunt," said he at last, "what have you to say?" "Why this," said Blunt, wiping his bleeding lip. "That fellow, Myles Falworth, has been breeding mutiny and revolt ever since he came hither among us, and because he would mutinous, I would punish him." "In that ye lie!" burst out Myles. "Never have I been mutinous in my life." "Be silent, sir," said Sir James sternly. "I will hear ye later." "Nay," said Myles, with his lip twitching and withering, "I will not be silent. I am friendless here, and ye are all against me, but I will not be silent and brook to have lies spoken of me." Even Blunt stood aghast at Myles' boldness. Never he heard everyone speak so to Sir James before. He did not dare for the moment even to look up. Second after second of dead stillness passed, while Sir James sat looking at Myles with a stern, terrifying calmness that chilled him in spite of the heat of his passion. "Sir," said the old man at last, in a hard, quiet voice, "ye know naught of rules and laws of such a place as this. Nevertheless, it is time for ye to learn. So I will tell you now that if ye open your lips to say only one single word more except at my bidding, I will send you to the black vault of the dungeon to cool your hot spirits on bread and water for a week." There was something in the measured quietness of the old knight's tone that quelled Myles utterly and entirely. A little space of silence followed. "Now then, Blunt," said Sir James, turning to the bachelor, "tell me all the ins and outs of this business, with no more underdealing." This time, Blunt's story, though naturally prejudiced in his own favour, was fairly true. Then Myles told his side of the case. The old knight listened attentively. "Why, how now, Blunt," said Sir James when Myles had ended. "I myself gave the lads leave to go to the river to bathe. Why should ye forbid one of them?" "I did it but to punish this fellow for his mutiny," said the bachelor. "I thought we at their head were to have oversight concerning them." "So ye are," said the knight, "but only to a degree. Before ye take it upon ye to overrule any of my orders or permits, come ye first to me. Do you understand?" "Aye," answered Blunt sullenly. "So be it. Now get ye gone," said the knight, "and let me hear no more of beating out brains with wooden clogs. If ye fight your battles, let there be no murder in them. This is twice that the likes has happened. If I hear more of such doings—" He did not utter his threat, but stopped short, and fixed his one eye sternly upon the head squire. "Now shake hands and be ye friends," said he abruptly. Blunt made a motion to obey, but Myles put his hand behind him. "Nay, I shake not hands with anyone who struck me while I was down." "So be it," said the knight grimly. "Now you may go, Blunt. Falworth, stay. I would speak to you further." "Tell me," said he, when the elder lad had left them, "why will ye not serve those bachelors as the other squires do? Such is the custom here. Why will ye not obey it?" "Because," said Myles, "I cannot stomach it, and they shall not make me serve them. If ye bid me do it, sir, I will do it, but not at their command." "Nay," said the knight, "I do not bid ye do them service. That lies with you to render or not as you see fit. But how can ye hope to fight single-handed against the commands of a dozen lads, all older and mightier than you?" "I know not," said Myles, "but were they 100 instead of 13, they should not make me serve them." "Ye are a great fool," said the old knight, smiling faintly, "for that be not courage at all, but folly. When one sets about righting a wrong, one drives not full head against it, for in so doing one gets naught but hard knocks. Nay, go deftly about it, and then when the time is ripe, strike the blow. Now our beloved King Henry, when he was the Earl of Derby, what could he have gained if he stood against the old king, brooking the king face to face? I tell you, he would have been knocked on the head as ye were like to have been this day. Now were I you, and had to fight a fight against odds, I would first get me friends behind me. And then... He stopped short, but Miles understood him well enough. Sir, said he with a gulp, I do thank you for your friendship, and ask your pardon for doing as I did. I grant you pardon, said the knight, but tell you plainly, if ye face me so again, I will truly send thee to the black cell for a week. Now get ye away. All the other lads were gone when Miles came forth, save only faithful Guskin, who sacrificed his bath that day to stay with his friend. And perhaps that little act of self-denial moved Miles more than many a great thing might have done. It was kind of you, Francis, said he, laying his hand affectionately on his friend's shoulder. I know not why ye love me so. Why, for one thing, this matter, answered his friend, because I think ye are the best fighter, and the bravest one of all the squires. Miles laughed. Nevertheless, Guskin's words were a soothing balm for much that had happened that day. I will fight me no more just now, said he, and then he told his friend all that Sir James had advised about biding his time. Guskin blew a long whistle. Beshrew me, said he, but I think old Bruin is on your side of the quarrel, Miles. If that be so, I'm with you also, and others that I can name as well. So be it, said Miles. Then am I content to bide this time when we may become strong enough to stand against them.